All right, so we had Christian McCaffrey's hamstring injury, and we provided a video showing the injury itself.
Coming from Carolina's Blue 10, not good, and you'll see it right here. Christian McCaffrey, guys, is out of this game with a hamstring injury. Just awful news considering.
So for the etiology, Christian McCaffrey was injured in the Panthers' 24-9 win over the Houston Texans. He was making a stutter step with his right leg locking up while he was running a sweep play during his team's third possession. And then I found that Dr. Brian Sutter analyzed the play where he broke down what could have happened at each step, beginning with the terminal swing phase when Christian's right leg was straight forward, the moment at which the hamstring was stretched fully. He then eccentrically loads it back to pull backwards, but does not complete the swing in the rear direction. He instead stuttered mid-run on his right leg, as you could see that was in the video, where the injury most likely occurred at this moment. Sources later confirmed it was a hamstring strain and was diagnosed as a less than a grade 1 sprain. And then I found that according to Fox Sports injury and performance analyst Dr. Matt said that the hamstring injuries are highly likely after a high ankle sprain, which McCaffrey suffered from last season. And then I also, for one of the case information and the sources that we found for it, I used the Draft Sharks, which can be used for fantasy football leagues, just to find the stats on players. And then what was for Christian was Christian had multiple injuries in the past and has been said to be injury prone with a 78% chance of injury in 2021 on the site, according to the injury predictor. And then he's also not been able to completely finish a full season since 2019. And the injuries that Christian has suffered for in the past 2 years of his career were the ones listed below. I have pedal ankle high sprain, grade 3. That was the high ankle sprain. I also provided the medical definitions for each of the injuries after them. But he also had a shoulder AC joint sprain, a thigh glute strain, and a thigh hamstring strain, grade 2, all within the past 2 years of his career.
So for this case information, I did a Pro Football Network. And as you see in the video, he suffered a hamstring injury in the second quarter, and then Christian McCaffrey was taken out of the game. He was then quickly moved to the sideline medical tent for evaluation and was ultimately ruled out of the game. It was only confirmed after, though, that McCaffrey had suffered a hamstring strain, which would lead to him getting an MRI. This is Christian McCaffrey's fourth injury in the last 2 seasons. This injury was initially handled by McCaffrey spending a fair amount of time in the medical tent for evaluation, and then he was being helped up and walked to the Panthers locker room for further treatment. And on this next one, Christian McCaffrey was placed on injured reserve after his hamstring injury, which puts him out for a minimum of another 3 weeks. This move results in McCaffrey missing 3 games in total, and he won't be eligible to return until week 9 of the season. People are saying he will most likely be sidelined while other players see the majority of the carries. McCaffrey was not placed on injured reserve initially, but he had participated in some practices. There was some hope that he would be able to return in week 6, but he just could not perform in the practices following the injury. McCaffrey has missed 13 games with 3 different injuries in the last season. And right now the Panthers are playing it by ear, and they're saying that the doctors will clear him whenever they're ready, and whenever McCaffrey feels like he can play, they'll go with him.
Okay, so for this case information, I focus more on history of his past injuries. So November 20th, 2020, he suffered a high ankle sprain. His original timeline was 4 to 6 weeks, but he was out a little bit longer than that. But he did come back to practice after about 6 weeks. He missed a total of 13 games, as Reese just said, in the 2020 season. And then of those 13 games, he had 3 lower extremity injuries that he suffered within the past 13 months. And then according to a 17-year observational cohort study, it was found that elite athletes had a statistically higher risk of a hamstring injury after previously suffering an ankle injury. And then the article argued that there should be significantly more focus on musculoskeletal rehabilitation rather than just the injured area. And then with his ankle sprain, it takes a minimum of 6 weeks for the ankle to fully heal, but then it also takes 3 months for all of his ligaments to fully heal. And then by bringing him back as early as they did, it led him more susceptible to further injury. And then how this case, if this case would correspond with something that we would typically see. Um, Typically, hamstring injuries are non-contact, and they're just caused by extensive hip flexion with an extended knee during the running cycle. Um, McCaffrey has had a list of consecutive injuries, which would suggest a higher possibility of additional injury. And then the treatment of his injury isn't fully disclosed by the Panthers, but he has been on injury reserve and he has been getting the MRIs that would be expected. So the mechanism of his injury correlates, and so does his history of injury correlates. But with the treatment, it doesn't typically correlate because it seems like they're rushing it and they're not letting his body to fully heal. This could be an issue with rehab. This could also be an issue with prehab to prevent the future possibility of him getting injuries.
So for here, we're looking at what could have been done differently. And I found that according to the National Athletics Trainers Association position statement for participation, physical examination, and disqualifying conditions, a comprehensive medical and family history should be attained from each participant. Nowhere in the reports did it mention that the athletic trainers looked at the family history and the medical history of the player at first take, only after he was evaluated in the Panthers injury room. Musculoskeletal injury is a very common cause for the restriction or disqualification of an athlete. So by looking at their medical and family history, it should be an attempt to detect any underlying condition that might predispose an athlete to an injury. Especially with Christian McCaffrey, who has had many injuries before, special attention in the initial examination should be given to any areas that would have been injured or could have been injured, undergone surgery. General health screening should always be performed for the initial examination of a player injured on the field. This would include things like vital signs, visual acuity testing, cardiovascular, neurological, general medical examination, and musculoskeletal examination. Family history should include things being looked into, such as premature death in the family before age 50 due to heart disease, any disabilities from heart disease in a close relative range, specific knowledge of a certain cardiac conditions in family members, hypertrophic or dilated cardiomyopathy, long QT syndrome, and etc. The initial examination on the field should have been checked for heart murmurs, femoral pulses, and artery blood pressure in a sitting position.
And then lastly, we had our works cited page right here.